Dress codes. Every school encourages students to dress in a manner that is considered to be productive to learning. But how does someone define the correct way to dress? And are school uniforms really making as great of an impact as we think they are? Today there is a large range of dress standards for students to meet, between school uniforms and complete dress freedom. Some schools go to the extreme of picking out what students are going to wear for them. Everything from how they have to wear their hair to the color of their socks. Other schools slack on reinforcing any type of dress regulation at all, claiming that students are old enough to decide what to wear for themselves and uniforms are unnecessary and more of a hassle than a help. A typical school uniform may consist of khaki pants, shirts with collars, skirts, long white socks, or anything that has a school logo or school colors on it. Uniforms are put in place to make everyone look similar and business casual. So what are the pros of wearing a school uniform? School uniforms minimize distractions, they create school spirit with everyone wearing school colors, they make mornings easier for parents so they don't have to deal with the stress of their child not knowing what to wear for the day. Uniforms help enforce positive behavior, and uniforms create equality across the group. Educators and experts who support school uniforms argue that uniforms contribute positively to the behavior of students. They believe that students feel more professional and feel like they belong to something when they wear school uniforms, which, as a result, encourages them to behave accordingly. In addition, distracting fashion trends and status symbol clothing are eliminated, enabling students to focus more on their academic goals. Or in other words, there's less focus on fashion in the classroom and more on learning. There are some downsides to wearing a school uniform. The biggest one that is the most complained about is that it takes away a student's freedom of expression. Another thing is that uniforms can be very expensive to purchase, especially when you have to purchase lots at one time. Uniforms can also be very uncomfortable to wear for an entire school day. Uniforms encourage conformity rather than individuality. And lastly, uniforms draw attention to social and economic division. Critics believe that forcing kids to wear uniforms limits their personal expression. They argue that kids lose their self-identity when they lose their right to freely express themselves through personal fashion. Although there is less focus on fashion in the classroom and more on learning, not having uniforms creates a divide between social classes, drawing attention to the fact that one student might wear expensive and nice clothes every day, while another might wear discount clothing. Although we pointed out earlier that school uniforms are more economical compared to buying a whole school wardrobe, critics argue that it can be more costly to buy several uniforms at once. Also, there may be other types of uniforms parents are required to buy aside from everyday uniforms, such as PE uniforms and formal uniforms. Aside from expenses, students will be forced to wear a uniform, restricting them from wearing clothes of their own personal comfort, aiding in reducing performance. School uniforms support conformity, which is not helpful in the future, because it teaches students to follow others and do what everyone else does. Students should be taught individuality and creativity, aside from following what some people believe is right. So the real question is there a compromise? Is there a chance that something could be done to make both sides of the argument happy? And how do we find a way to eliminate expensive uniforms but still keep school spirit? And how do we allow freedom of expression but still minimize distractions? Some people believe that schools should have a set uniform that limits distractions and hassles, while other schools believe that dress standards should be up to the student's decision and have no restrictions. To compromise, schools should have dress expectations, because that will still allow freedom of choice while staying in the boundaries of what is appropriate. For example, students would be able to wear what they feel expresses their individuality. However, educators and other schools' authorities could set guidelines such as no spaghetti straps, short length, and no clothing representing drugs or alcohol. By doing this, students feel as though they are given their own choices on how to dress, but also can be structured for the school environment. Many schools have already implemented dress expectations into their criteria. For example, at Highlands Middle School and High School, they allow their students to make their own dress decisions, and will step in if necessary to ensure an appropriate environment. Students are allowed to wear clothing that makes them feel comfortable and dress to their liking, while not being restricted from expressing their own creativity. And by allowing guidelines and expectations rather than a dress code and uniforms, staff and teachers can allow themselves to be more focused on students' schoolwork and education, rather than being a hindrance to learning. By having expectations, teachers aren't worried about whether or not students are wearing their uniform correctly or following along with the dress code. Students and parents often have trouble with knowing whether or not their child's outfit fits the dress code, which takes away more time by making calls to home for parents to bring a change of clothes for students that are out of dress code. Expectations for dress is the most realistic and efficient way to control students' dress, keeping students under guidelines but not forcing them to conform to how others believe they should. Some major points to remember. The decision between having a school uniform or not will always remain to be a controversy. A bulletin published by the National Association of Secondary School Principals stated that when all students are wearing the same outfit, they are less concerned about how they look and how they fit in with their peers. Thus, they can concentrate on their schoolwork. A 2010 University of Houston study found that elementary school girls' language test scores increased by about 3 percentile points after uniforms were introduced. Former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, when she was a 2008 U.S. presidential candidate, advocated school uniforms as a way to help students focus on learning. Take that clothing choices off the table and put the focus on school, not on what you are wearing. Principal of Woodland Middle School, Chris Hammonds, stated that uniforms provide for less distraction, less drama, and more of a focus on learning. Yet in another case, enforcing standardized dress sends a contradictory message. Chicago junior high school student Kyler Summert wrote in Huffington Post, "They decide to teach us about people like Rosa Parks, Susan B. Anthony, and Booker T. Washington. We learn about how these people expressed themselves in Concord, and we can't even express ourselves in the hallways." Troy Schumann, a senior in Hartford County, said the introduction of a mandatory uniform policy to his school would be teaching conformity and destroying individuals. Just think of prisons and gangs. The ultimate socializer to crush rebellion is conformity in appearance. If a school system starts to close, where does it end? In schools where uniforms are specifically gendered, girls must wear skirts and boys must wear pants, transgendered and gender fluid students can feel ostracized. A 16-year-old transgender boy stated, "Sitting in a blouse and skirt all day makes me feel insanely anxious. I wasn't taken seriously. This is atrocious and damaging to a young person's mental health. The uniform nearly destroyed me." George Carlin asked, "Don't these schools do enough damage? Making all these children think alike, now they're going to make them look alike too?" So where does your decision lie? Do you believe that schools should have a strict uniform that tells students what to wear? Or do you think that schools should have absolutely no say in what a child gets to wear every day to school? Or are dress expectations the exact kind of compromise that you have been looking for all along?